Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Śrīla Mayapur in West Bengal, India, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily spiritual podcast with your host, Raghunath. Our co-host, Kostuba, is taking the evening off tonight because we have some special guests and special interviews with scientists. Now, some people think, well, these Hare Krishnas, they're all a bunch of ex-punk rockers. They're covered in tattoos. Well, guess what? And yesterday we had a gang member tell his story of how he went from enforcer of a gang to working security, initiate or aspiring initiate of Mayapur Dham. Great show yesterday. If you missed it, please check out the interview with Govinda. And today we'll think, well, okay, these guys, they're thugs, they're enforcers, they're a bunch of tattooed guys, they're from the punk rock scene. Yes, all that's true, but they're also scientists. And some of the scientists have tattoos. So, so we're really excited to bring on these Vedic scientists who are here in Mayapur working on this. It's almost, I'm going to let them explain it, but it's actually a dream that Śrīla Prabhupāda, our Param Guru, our guru's guru, had to build here with the vision of what he wanted. And we're going to talk about that vision. Why a Vedic planetarium? What the heck is a Vedic planetarium? Most people, it's confusing because we know planetariums from the time we grew up in. I went to a planetarium in New York City when I was a little kid, and we see, okay, there's Orion, and there is the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper. What else was there? There's a couple others, and then none of them looked like what it was. Like, that's really a man on a horse. But anyway, they're here to explain a Vedic paradigm of the celestial bodies, and it's very interesting. But before we get onto that, Miss Mara, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I should mention tomorrow's show will be back to 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, and Sunday we'll be taking the day off as we travel.
Tomorrow's going to be a great interview with this lady we really fell in love with, me and Mara and Linda. Sitala is here, and she is just one of these, joined when she was 20 years old in 1970, and in 2 months Prabhupada said, okay, now you're going to go to Cleveland, start a temple there. And she's just been on this mission from God since her early days. She wrote an incredible book that reads, it's called, what is it called?
The Glorious Life of Śrīla Narottam Das Thakur.
Yeah, so Narottam Das Thakur, a great saint in our lineage, really famous for his poetry, his songwriting. And, a lot of times we read these stories by academics and it's a little clunky. It's not a sweet, smooth. She writes it in just such a smooth way that first thing I'm going to do when I finish this, I'm going to give it to my 11-year-old who's, he'll be able to read it. It's hard to get my older kids to read stuff nowadays, but my 11-year-old will read that if I make him. And he'll like it too. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this, and I really want her to write more books, but we're going to talk to her, and she's got a lot of interesting adventures. And she had a pretty fun job I won't just say women, for anybody who likes to shop.
Yeah.
Her job was to shop for all the deities around the world, because all the deities, they started creating temples all over the world, and they needed hats, crowns rather, and dresses and stuff like that. So she had to go to Vrindavan for all the temples and do shopping and sit with them. And she talks, and she was there, in the early days of Vrindavan, and she'll share her time there. And she was also here in the early days of Mayapur. So I'd like to pick her brain about that. Any other announcements, Miss Mara?
No, that's all I got. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you more intimidated by yesterday's interview guests or today's?
Today's.
Just checking.
Today's. No, I can hang with gang members pretty well. It's the scientific community that sort of intimidates me, and I got 3 of them tag teaming me today. But let's bring on a few of them. First, we have Dharmavir. He's American. I can deal with Americans, and he's got tattoos, and it looks like he's got physicist tattoos on his arms. Come real close. The thing about, and we have Dharmavir, we have Giridhari, He's from Italy. Dharma, where are you from?
I am from Alachua, Florida.
Okay, Alachua, Florida. And we have Laura Dominic, right? And Laura is going to switch out because we can't only fit so many people unless you want to lay across the laps. That may be inappropriate in certain circles, but we're okay with it. But we're going to bring on Laura too. Dharma's an astrophysicist. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Laura's an astrophysicist, and Giridhari is a PhD in astronomy. So these mics, I'm just going to give you a hint right here. You got to put them right up to your mouth. They won't pick up anything else, but they won't pick up you if you got them away from here. So you got to put it right on your mouth. So I want to talk first about Prabhupada had this. I mean, even devotees, I don't think quite understand this. We can understand like the world is suffering. They're suffering with addiction. They're suffering with obsession and materialism. They're suffering with consumed in working in a system where they're always in debt, or they're consumed with just they just don't know what life's about, and life feels directionless. And so Prabhupada had a mission to distribute transcendental literature all over the world. Why is a big part of what he wanted to establish a Vedic planetarium of all things? It seems like that's a little, it seems a little, could seem a little odd. So can you fill us in to make it sound, what's the reasoning behind this and why here?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having us.
Harry Bo, my pleasure.
You've had my wife on the show before.
That's right. Sharanagati.
Sharanagati.
That you can listen to old interviews we did on search on YouTube. And that was a great interview. Kostuba did.
Yeah. So it has now gone through another iteration where it's called the Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium.
It's not called the TOVP anymore?
The TOVP is the main temple.
Okay.
A wing of it, a very large wing of it with another giant dome, is the Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium.
Okay.
Not a great acronym. Doesn't really roll.
No, it's not good. You got to think.
the
You might have
SMOV.
to think things with acronyms.
Yeah.
Maybe add a letter.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea is that we want to bring the science of the Vedas to the general public. And what that means is we do this in a more contemporary way. So we talk about ideas in modern science and how they compare to what we learn in the Bhagavatam.
Mm.
So it is actually meant to be a bona fide, modern 21st century science museum.
Okay.
And if you'd like the layout of it, it's a really cool way that this the museum is laid out. So it's 4 floors, where the first floor, you learn all about what is the self. So you learn about the Atma and how consciousness is not just a product of the brain, but you are, an eternal Atma.
Mm.
And then it's a dwell museum. So you wind around up to the next level where you learn about life on Earth and how everyone is interconnected as Atmas, etc. And then it gets really exciting. It's a planetarium after all. So you then go up to the 3rd floor, which is all about cosmology. And it is going to be mind-blowing.
Cosmology is what, for those of us who are me?
Cosmology is kind of like the bucket term, umbrella term for all of the universe that we study.
Okay.
Observationally. But in the Vedic paradigm, there's a lot of unseen universe.
Interesting.
That we'll get to.
So there's Vedic is cosmology the same as cosmography?
Cosmography is kind of like the mapping of things.
Okay.
Cosmology is that plus the evolution of things.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole, it's safe to say, invisible things that we can never see because they're beyond human vision. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So the idea is that, we'll have lots of Western people come here that aren't familiar with a lot of this material. Sure. So the idea is that we kind of hold their hand along the way, very gently along the way, each showing that consciousness is not from matter.
Okay.
It's something different. It's not in space and time. It's something outside of it that's eternal.
So that's the ground floor, basically.
but that's the theme we want to hit on every level, is that this is a consciousness-based universe. And that's what Prabhupada really wanted to get across, was that everything is grounded in consciousness. In other words, there's agency or Krishna behind everything.
It's amazing because it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was like perhaps when the Hare Krishnas first came onto the scene in the 60s and 70s, we were almost like screaming at a wall. But it seems like people are a little bit more open to a multi-dimensional universe. There's things beyond our perception.
Yeah.
We are actually limited beings. All these things that Prabhupada spoke about, the Bhagavatam speaks about, is actually sort of, people are going, is the scientific community, have they had either a massive paradigm shift or a little tiny paradigm shifts to come to where they are now?
You picked up on it. It's basically just a really boring short history lesson. But, a few hundred years ago and before that, science and philosophy were always together. It was one discipline. It was the natural sciences. And then a couple hundred years ago, there's this big split where science went one way, philosophy went another, but science could build things and make things. So it started getting, more power over the culture. So everything became science, philosophy got denigrated. But now, like you're saying, consciousness is roaring back because we're getting to all these dead ends with science.
Wow.
And we're missing that piece of the puzzle that can really give us the bigger picture. Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what I wanted just to say that, we think that, we may think that, these Hare Krishnas, they believe in crazy things, and devas and multidimensionality, but you should open a physics book.
Right.
That's really the things really becomes crazy, where so many unseen things are actually ruling our physical world. And we are finding so many parallels, actually.
Sure.
From the really modern understanding of how the physical world works with the Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic scriptures in general, describe how cosmos is made and working.
I love the idea how it starts at the ground floor, like there's Atma, there's spirit in matter, animating this matter, and that spirit can extend not just into animals and trees, but actually into planets. Like planets are beings.
Yeah.
And that in itself is sort of like, oh, wow, that's very interesting. And I also like this fact that, and truthfully, unless you cross this threshold, which is, this is, just like all these other myths from the Nordics and from in South America, the Aztec myths and the Japanese myths, this is just another book of myths, a book of stories. But once you cross that threshold, like, actually, what makes me think I can perceive everything? And so I remember the first time, before I was a devotee, and some devotee was telling me about the planet Rahu. And they said, and some of you may not even know this, but there is a planet, according to the Vedas, according to Jyotish, there's a planet closer to us than the moon. Now, most of us are like, well, that's nonsense. But according to the Vedas, there are. Well, why can't I see it? Because you can't see it. There's certain things you can't see and you won't be able to see because you don't have the appropriate instruments to see it. And when I first heard, when someone explained it to me like that, I was like, oh, that's right. I may not be able to see everything. No matter how much I extend my limited vision, it's still limited. So that once you accept that there can be things beyond my perception, it takes almost a ceiling off of my entire worldview, universal view, cosmo view of reality.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are doing that right now. So you want to elaborate more on Prabhupada's vision of this Vedic planetarium? And
Yeah,
are you working with that, or are you working just with the scientific part of it?
We work with the scientific part of it, but this is very long. This project is coming from more than 500 years ago when Nityananda was, envisioning this temple, this big place, the TOVP.
This was Nityananda's vision.
Yeah, that was Nityananda's vision. And,
you want to explain that a little?
Yeah, it's not
a lot of people don't know anything that are listening to the show.
Nityananda. So yeah, about 500 years ago, Nityananda was one of the main, manifestations of God in this world. So he was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he got that vision because he represents also our spiritual parampara, our disciplic succession. So, and he was saying, he was nearby here, and he was saying, here we come this big place, and millions of people will come here and see what Krishna consciousness is. And so became, the kind of mission of every spiritual master from there on. And Prabhupada is realizing that. And the idea is to present Krishna consciousness as it is. That means it's in a scientific way. It's not another religion. It's not that you have to change clothes or eat differently, those things like that. But it's actually to understand that we live in a consciousness-based universe. And, there is a conscious hierarchy of beings. And at the top of this, there is the supreme consciousness. So that's what it is. And everyone can just understand how it works and be part of it.
Maybe you could tell us more about the floors. You said it starts off, I am not the body. Then you climb up the 4 levels.
Yeah, the second level is the level of life, where because one thing that you cannot deny is I'm conscious. I am consciousness. I'm conscious of myself. So everything starts from there. So who am I? So then I am starting thinking, oh, maybe the other people here is conscious, and then maybe the animals are conscious because they manifest, so many, amazing behaviors. So yeah, maybe consciousness is everywhere. So that's life. What's life is that an atma is into a body. So consciousness is enlivening a body. And from there, then, we have a problem today. Today, we cannot see the sky anymore, the night sky. Or it's so polluted. It's so, light polluted and, environmental pollution.
And there's a lot of drones around now too. It's like, I can't even tell. Is that a planet or is that some kid with a drone?
Yeah.
I'm really confused sometimes. I point to my children, it's a North Star. He says, no, it's not. I said, a satellite from Elon Musk.
Yeah, and there is something worse than that we are all we all have our smartphones and look like this.
Sure.
We don't don't look at at the sky anymore.
Sure.
So the vision, because we have these big telescopes, big pictures, deep sky pictures, but those are not such amazing that giving that awe that a clear night sky can give us. So the ancients, they were seeing this kind of skies with all the movements of the planets and things. And this is giving some sense of connection with something bigger. So the question is, maybe this life is everywhere in the cosmos. It's not only in our planet.
It seems like such an arrogant thing to say.
Yeah.
That like sit back in my lawn chair, look up at the night sky and say, out of all of this, I'm the only thing that's alive. It's like, it doesn't get any more arrogant than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where else are we going with these floors? I really want to climb up these floors now.
Yeah. So one thing I want to make clear is that this isn't a museum where we are bashing scientists. We're scientists.
You're scientists.
We love science.
We're trying to trust the science here.
Yeah, and it's the language of today. It's the modern language. But the point is that through each level, what you find is that you kind of hit this roadblock every time. So whether it's studying the brain, something's missing. Like, what is this thing that we feel, this subjective experience? And then when you get to life on Earth, it's like, how did that first cell come around? How are we all here after this evolution of the universe? And then when you look at the cosmos, and I can tell you from experience that as amazing as all of the new images are from the James Webb Telescope and all of that, if you experience in a planetarium setting what it's like to go from a Calcutta sky to then slowly fading into what the night sky looked like 500 years ago, that is the most like awe-inspiring thing you can imagine. It's
What is that?
interconnection.
It's just pollution.
It's a you can see one or two stars, maybe a planet.
Oh, really?
But the actual night sky is ablaze with light and stars, and you see all the motion, and you're immediately interconnected. So it's not just that we've lost our connection through smartphones. Being disconnected from the sky is having real tangible effects on how we treat the planet, how we treat each other,
Ooh, I like
because
that.
we lose that harmony.
I like that.
So we try and bring that out a lot on the third floor. And then ultimately you have to get a little theological because we're right next to one of the biggest temples around.
Right.
So we slowly reveal that there's a supreme consciousness behind this cosmos.
So let me jump in right there. The TOVP, the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, is the biggest temple in India. Is that correct?
I don't know, but it's the biggest building I've ever seen in my life.
It's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest.
Right. It's the biggest dome I've heard. in
Have you been
India.
inside?
I've been inside. It's truthfully from afar and from in, both are awe-inspiring. And I went into the Nrsingadev wing, and I was like blown away by that. That's another little mini dome within it, and it's breathtaking. I'm really excited about it. And
Yeah.
I was just on the Ganga and crossing the Ganga just to see it in the distance. It's awe-inspiring. I understand why Christians build church or there's cathedrals, because it is awe-inspiring, as is the night sky, as is the Grand Canyon, as is the ocean. It makes you feel in perspective your tininess, which in my ego I forget about. I like to think that I'm the center. So it is awe-inspiring. So okay, go on. We're now at the third level, I think.
Yeah, we're at the third level. We're getting towards the end of the third level, and we think we've done a pretty good job of establishing that the missing ingredient all along the way is consciousness, and not just us little guys, but that there's a hierarchy. You know, you keep going out, there's a bigger consciousness. Ultimately, what we try and show, and I don't want to give too much away ahead of time, is that in the Vedic picture, the universe cycles. In fact, universes, unlimited universes, are born and die over and over for eternity. And the point we're trying to get across there is that everything in the material world is temporary. So even the universe, is unfathomable as it is temporary. But the Atma is not, consciousness is not temporary. So is this where we belong? Is this our home? Kind of feels like it's not sometimes.
Right.
So is there a place where consciousness or the Atma belongs?
That's a great question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there a place where I belong? And I think it's like an internal loneliness that the jiva feels like, where do I belong? Like, how come I feel alone in this universe? Where is my source? How do I reconnect? I think there's always been a small demographic of souls that just feel like there's got to be more than this, you know, and those people search for God or kill themselves to become existentialists and kill themselves. They're just like, it's so vast. Who am I? I'm so insignificant. It means nothing. Why even live? Right?
Never thought about it that way. But,
That's because you're pious. That's because, but I've got a question.
I'm having a crisis.
Wait a second. You got a good point. I just sold.
Wait a second.
I just sold you existentialism. So, Giridhar, you've been a devotee for a while, but you gotta hand that mic back because my question is for Dharma Beer here. Are you reasonably new to bhakti? Because I got a question for you. It seems like were you already a scientist and then you became a devotee?
Yeah.
See, that's my question. It seems like in the schools of science, they're teaching it sans God, you know, with no God in there. How did you make that leap, which seems like it's going to go against all your professors or all of your quote scientific training, where you're supposed to just, no, you can figure this out with your own mind, with your own intelligence, leave the God thing for the dopes, the dum-dums who can't face reality. How did you cross that bridge?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. And then also I'd love to pass it on to Laura because she has a pretty amazing story about this for her.
Want to hear that.
But for me, yeah, so when I met my wife, Sharanagati, I was a postdoc at the University of Chicago and loved doing cosmology. And I thought both my parents were scientists.
Okay.
And I thought that, math was basically the language of the universe. If you could learn that language, then you understood everything.
Okay.
And that became less and less attractive the farther I went. And you realize that's one language, but there are many languages that need to come together. So I started getting more and more disenchanted with just the straight ahead physics route that tells you about how things behave, but it doesn't tell you anything about the purpose of anything.
The whys,
The
behind
why.
behavior.
And deep down, that's
If
all
the
we want to
molecule
know.
does this. What the electrons do this.
Yeah.
Well, why is it doing that?
And that's a philosophy question. And
Oh,
I didn't
interesting.
know jack about philosophy.
Wow.
So, but I was a hard sell. I met Shara, and she comes from a devotee family, and it took me a long time, quite honestly. I'll be frank about it. You know, there was a lot of classes that I would sit in on where it's these scientists this and these scientists that.
The
And I felt
nasty old science. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt
You're like
unwell-
you're
I
going to be
felt
hated
unwelcome.
on immediately. Yeah.
But now that I know some of these people giving those classes, and they're some of the sweetest, most welcoming people. It's just, it was inside baseball kind of stuff.
Sure.
So it took me a while. I was kind of slow to it. I'd say it took me sort of 5 years before I even started giving into the idea that maybe there is a supreme being behind it all. But when it clicked fast.
Wow.
Yeah. It really was like an
awakening, sort of.
exactly like that. I remember the day. I remember exactly what happened.
That's
It
nice.
was remarkable.
Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura Dominic. Dominic. Welcome. And where are you from?
From France.
Oh,
Yep.
come a little closer. I mean, everybody scoos down a little bit. You're from where?
From France.
Oh, from France. Bonjour. And that's about all I got. Where part of France are you from?
From Toulouse in the south.
Toulouse. All right, nice. And how did you meet devotees? Or have you been a devotee for a long time?
Well, actually, I'm not really an Hare Krishna devotee. I'm here from a slightly different route.
Okay. We just met a moment ago. So that's why I'm not just like pretending to ask these questions. I'm just actually getting to know her right now.
Yeah. So I know it's maybe a dangerous thing to say here. So, I mean, I guess it's mostly about here a story about relationship and about meeting people that have common interest, because if I'm here because I'm working with those guys, we are have met through common interest about understanding the nature of reality and common passion about both science, but also everything that lives beyond and that we've been talking about. And so when I was doing my studies in Zurich, I met Candide, a philosopher, talking about consciousness. And I was completely mesmerized at the clarity of how this dialogue went.
Wait, you met who? I missed that.
Candide.
A candidate?
Candiditas?
Oh, a devotee named
Yeah.
Akana Das. Okay.
And we started having dialogues, and he invited me to join the team working on cosmogenesis. And eventually, by a different event, I ended up meeting them in person, moving in Florida. And at that point, I still didn't know about Hare Krishna.
Surprise. I can just see Gary and Hari now goes, oh, by the way, we're Hare Krishnas.
Well, kind of, I went downstairs the first morning and I saw him saying Hare Krishna, like what? But
Got a whole
Ridiculous.
outfit on. He's got a-
yeah, but I guess it's a testimony of how those type of discussion and topics, and when we talk about cosmology and the cosmos, the universe, and consciousness, it's something that transcends completely background and vocabulary. It's just about finding an open dialogue to talk about.
Sure.
And that's really what engaged me with this work at the museum, because I mean, it's one of those probably rare places on Earth where you can walk into a space and meet biology, meet neurology, meet cosmology, meet all those different things, and philosophy and metaphysics. And it's all in the open. It's all ready for you to make connection. So, that's what's driving me. We are often talking about it as it's also a museum for the future, for the children, for the young people.
We might even think of opening a special dome for gang members,
Yeah.
like a special gang. There must be some planet We had a gang member on yesterday. That's
Yeah,
why.
I met him. Yeah.
Okay. So, wow, that's a great story. So you were just sort of like, you were just inspired by a scientific minded devotee.
Yeah, and I think, people have been meeting here just embodying such beautiful values that you just want to stick around and be with them. That's what's important.
That's something also. It's sort of like you can study, you could be an academic at so many things, but you may have very low values, low ethics. So it's sort of like you get a real complete package. And you know what you also get? Hope. There's no hope in a mechanistic world of seeing the whole world as, okay, I am tiny. I understand now. I mean, I don't look at the sky that much. I mean, I live in upstate New York, so I see the sky more than most people. But we forget how tiny we are. We forget how insignificant we are. When I'm in a plane and they're bringing me food or I'm watching a movie, I forget that I'm actually in like a flying cigar, 30,000 feet in the air, and they're showing me a movie. I'm lost in the movie. So we forget our actual insignificance, and we think we're very important. So when we actually wake up to it, like you guys are doing, because you're studying the cosmos, you realize you're insignificant. Without God and without purpose, the whole world can very quickly, your whole personal world can, like, what's the meaning of love? What's the meaning of friendship? I'm going to live and die in a moment, and no one's going to remember me in the same way they're not going to remember this galaxy. We're not talking about galaxies that have disappeared, or I don't know what happened to galaxies. They burn up, or they blow up. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I want to advocate for science and cosmology a minute because you're talking about values, and that's exactly the connecting point. To me, that cosmology is this kind of middle step to talk about consciousness and higher things, because like it's one of those things that you can easily in everybody it inspire awe and wonder. It's something that connects you to something bigger. It's cosmos, it's our largest context and environment. And then you also have the aspect that it's driving you to be in perpetual state of learning, because you cannot find the edge of it.
You can't find the edge of it.
In the same way, like
the smartest brains, right, cannot find the edge of it.
But it's the same for your brain, like we have been talking about. What's the definition of consciousness? Like all of those things. How can I put a fixed definition on something? I cannot even find the edge of it in my own mind. It's not something I can encounter. So you have that. And then you have humility, because when you're in face of all of this unknown, and it's like Giridhari said, you're opening a physics book and it's full of things that I cannot touch, but it's so exciting. Black hole and space-time dilation. You get intuition about those things.
Excited about that too. Black holes and space-time dilation. You were talking about some telescope that I'd never heard of. That you were expecting, like, yeah, with everything we see of this blah, blah, blah telescope. What was that telescope called?
The James Webb Telescope.
The James Webb Telescope.
Yes.
Just what should I know about the James Webb Telescope, first of all? So this is the biggest telescope they're working with right now?
Well, it's by far the biggest and most impressive telescope. It's out in space, and
it's in space.
Yeah,
they got it in space.
It wasn't
smart.
It wasn't Elon Musk. It was something totally different.
Okay.
Got it out in space.
Okay.
And it is just capturing the deepest. So if the deeper you look into space, the farther you're looking back in time.
What? You got to understand who you're dealing with here. I am like, I got the brain of a
right. So light,
some type of like farm animal,
So the way you do astronomy is that you capture light from distant objects.
You capture light from distant
and
objects.
Like in a camera.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Capturing light.
I get that. Capturing light.
And that comes from some distance. And
From a
light,
distance.
light has some speed.
Okay.
But it has a fixed speed. We know it's one speed.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes.
So we're imaging things that are so far away. It takes light so long to travel there.
Keep it close. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There we go. That you can get the distance to these objects, and they're extremely far away, which means they're extremely young in the terms of the universe.
Wow.
But that's one thing. All you have to do is Google it and see some of the coolest images you'll ever
Really?
see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're finding new things that they never knew existed. Right.
Challenging paradigms, all of these.
Challenging their entire worldview, huh?
Yeah.
Can I ask some questions about Vedic cosmography now, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So are we done with this? Let's wrap up the TOVP because I've got a lot of
Yeah.
questions here, and I really want to get to the bottom of this. So, what floor are we on now? We're the top floor of the Science Museum. What's the fourth floor?
The fourth floor is when we actually go to the spiritual world.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And and what do you have, like dioramas for that or something?
It's
Like
unclear how we're going to do it, but
Oh, that's
the
interesting.
design team
Droids?
we're working with, yeah, we're open to ideas. Droids, like,
You know what's fine about museums? They always date themselves, and because as technology grows, things get dated really quick. That's the problem. How are you going to deal with that?
yeah, upkeep, and then you said it, like you have to keep coming with new technology,
Right.
and this is totally funded by donations. So we're just hoping that it will be continuously funded.
Sure.
But before we go to the Vedic stuff, can I
Okay,
just
yeah,
make
yeah.
one last point?
Sure.
Because I think it's important about the Science Museum. As what Laura was saying about this mood of humility, I think it's a little bit unique when it comes to when you see scientists on YouTube or something else. Seems
Okay.
to be.
I've
this is
never
not true
watched
of
a
all-
scientist on YouTube.
It's not. Yeah, it's not true of all scientists, but there can be a general lack of humility when approaching subjects. The ego gets in the way. But
Interesting, huh?
but all we want to say in some aspect is that paradigm shifts always happen in history.
Sure.
One of those was the paradigm shift around the time of Descartes, where the world went, instead of being a relational world, to one where the world gets chopped up into little pieces. The world is from the bottom up. You build it from fundamental pieces. So what does that mean? It means, yeah.
You're asking me?
So
I
what
don't understand what you said.
Well, what it means is that instead of everything being interconnected, there are distinct things
Okay.
that you study,
Okay.
and then you measure them and do this and that. And it's this thing that's out there that you just do measurements on and learn about. But that actually has some pretty serious repercussions. So think about what that means for the planet. If it's just this thing that it's at your disposal to play around with and use as you want, you treat it as if it's in your service, as opposed to you being in service to it. So what we try and get across in this museum is not just like all the fun stuff in science, but an approach to it that's humble, that gives you a different outlook. Because if it's a consciousness-based universe, you're going to treat the planet in a completely different way.
Sure.
Anyways, we can get to the cool
Well,
cosmography.
that is a interesting point, though, because if we want knowledge through our paradigm of spirituality, you can only get it through humility. You can have some knowledge, but you actually can't get close to Krishna. And that's an interesting thing, because generally when I get knowledge or I have some insight and we're a little thoughtful more than other people, naturally or unnaturally comes with the ego with that too. And so we get proud of our intellect. We get proud of our memory. We get proud of our very creative thoughts, our bold statements. But the fact is, to really get to Krishna, and there's many great devotees who are deep intellectual, but they carry that deep, loving humility, and because of that, it invites God to come closer.
Yeah.
Whereas the arrogance pushes God, pushes wisdom, pushes truth far away from us. In the same way, sometimes, you tell your teenager, okay, look, there's going to be a party tonight. You got to be careful. There might be big kids from the college hanging out at that party. And your daughter's going, I know, Dad, I know. So once they say, I know, they've stopped listening. Once you have a type of arrogance, you're going to always, you're going to push back any information that's coming in because you already know. But once you have a type of humility, like if I told my daughter, okay, this is not my daughter, I'm just a fictitious daughter. My daughter's great, listens to everything I say. But a fictitious daughter might say something like, yes, Father, I hear your advice. You are wise. I'm going to be careful at that party because other older guys from the college could show up and cause all types of problems for me. Thank you for your wisdom. They stop and they absorb it. So this type of humility, we can get information and we can change and we get closer to truth. So yeah, that was a great point. So
Yeah.
now we're at the top floor of the TOVP Science Museum, and we're seeing ourselves in the spiritual world. Now
Yeah,
the main dome, what is that going to look like?
that is kind of in flux. We're not
Okay.
we're not entirely sure. There was an original plan.
What was Prabhupada's desire?
Well, Giridhari, do you want to
Switch.
I just want to be careful. I give the
Represent.
correct history of
Okay.
because he's been a devotee for 27 years and he knows much more about the full history of it.
Oh, Giridhari.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
Thanks, Laura.
So yeah, so the vision was no, the general vision was to present Krishna consciousness in a scientific way. So Śrīla Prabhupāda wanted the name of this big temple to be the temple of the Vedic Planetarium, and in the main dome. But now we have to understand we are shifting because there are 3 domes in the
Sure.
temple of Vedic Planetarium. So there is the main dome, center one. That's the big one. By the way, it's bigger than St. Peter's in the Vatican.
It's
So it's
bigger
it's
than
big.
St. Peter's
Yeah,
Basilica.
it's big.
Wow.
It's huge. It's
Okay.
huge. And but we were at the dome of the West Wing
Okay.
just now. The
Oh,
fourth
okay.
level of the museum is the little dome. Say
little
little,
dome.
it's
It's still
anyway huge.
So what's going to be in the big dome, or what?
So in the big dome, we have obviously the main altars with all the deities, and hanging from the top of the main dome is the project of Prabhupada wanted a big chandelier, you say like that?
Chandelier.
Where all the different pieces of the cosmography of Srimad Bhagavatam are displayed, and then you have 2 or 3 big galleries,
Wow.
and you can go there and see the chandelier and see, many things there to understand how the Vedic concept, the concept of the Vedic universe is
Okay.
displayed. Yeah.
First, let me jump in here because there's 2, from what I understand, and I'm one of those guys when it gets to scientific planetary things in the Bhagavatam, I like jump right over it and just like pretend they're not there,
Yeah.
just because it's hard for my little brain to grasp. So, from what I understand, there's Jyotish or Vedic astrology where you're studying, and please correct me if I'm wrong because I may be way off. From what I understand from Jyotish, you're trying to understand the stars from sitting on the planet Earth, trying to look up. And the cosmography of the Bhagavatam is completely different. Is it from the demigods looking down at the planets?
That's a good question. If I can,
Because they're very different.
I want just to tell a story of myself, because everybody that knows that I'm an astronomer, the first question I get from those guys of the Vedic guys is, how could you read the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Because when you get there, you don't understand.
Well,
And
for our people, they know nothing about. Most of our people don't know the difference. There is Jyotish, there's Vedic astrology, and then there's Bhagavatam astronomy as well. So maybe share.
Yeah, that's Bhagavatam astronomy. So this scripture, this very old scripture, is divided in many different cantos and many different topics. One of that is cosmography, cosmology. So when you get there, because I am an astronomer, when I got there and reading all those the Sanskrit, ancient texts, it was okay. So many people they don't interface with that because they don't know how to deal with astronomy. Because what the problem is, if we start now speaking about astronomy, the most of the people that are listening, they are not knowing 90% of what I'm telling. If I have to have an astronomy lecture, it will take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to explain just little things.
The simplest thing.
So you got there in a matter of 300, 400 verses, a brief description of everything. So it's obvious you need to be an expert of those things to understand. So the point is, if you know astronomy, the very simple astronomy, visual astronomy, you go there and 80% of those verses are actually just simple astronomy. Nothing, nothing transcendental, say.
Okay.
That's the point.
Okay. So now, look, we need likes, we need hits, we need comments, we need subscriptions. Let me ask some good questions that have been like. Tell me about hell. No. Here's what I understand. some sages see the universe like I grew up, there is heaven. Good people go to heaven. Bad people, they go to hell. So, and then I'm on earth. And then there's like this mysterious purgatory where you're not in heaven and you're not in hell. So my question is this. It's described as a 14 planetary systems. From what I understand, they are like discs. Each planetary system is like a disc. In that disc, there's many, many like islands, which would be perhaps the planets. The bottom being Patala, and the top one being the
Siddhaloka,
Brahmaloka or
Brahmaloka,
Siddhaloka, something like the Loka or the planet of perfected beings. And then there's the higher planets are all types of heavens where perfected beings, higher beings live, demigods reside. The lower ones, that's what I'm sort of curious about. From what I understand, there's different types of hells, etc. Now we're in the place in the bottom. So far, am I correct?
Okay, you got
And
it.
where would Earth-
99%. The
it's-
thing about the discs and things, maybe we can drop
Is that
it.
right?
No,
Discs?
not completely, but you know,
No
there
discs?
are some discs there, but you know,
I thought it was like in lighter.
there are 14 planetary systems. That's great.
Okay.
We got it.
Now
Yeah.
within those planetary systems, is it split right down the middle? 7 good, 7 bad.
Yeah.
It is. And where's Earth? Right dead. in the
What
middle.
does it mean bad?
It means, for example, here's how I explain it to people. I explain like in this planet, you can see the entire universe. For example, you have people that, I have clients that will just say, you know what, I'm going to meet my yacht at this point in the ocean. My helicopter will fly me to that yacht. They live as if they're in a heaven right now on this planet. And then there's people who were born in, the murder capital of the world, in the Congo or something like that, where they're waking up and trying to run for their lives. So there's heaven and hell in this world. So what does heaven and hell mean? It means where life is filled with some type of refined sense gratification, where you're deciding like what $700 bottle of wine you're going to drink tonight, or whether you're going to survive the night because you've been locked in the basement by a human trafficker or something like that. So there's heavens and hell. So that's what I'm thinking. Are these hellish planets like places that you're going in due time? And what are the heavenly planets? And then where does Earth fit in those 14?
Yeah. Middle.
So right in the middle.
That's a very good question, actually. And we should go back to the principle that we are in a consciousness-based universe.
Okay.
So consciousness, one of the quality of the characteristic of consciousness is we want experience. We need experience. We need connections. We need to love and be loved. We need connections. We want to experience things. So this universe is created in a way that you have many places and you can get many bodies to experience. So
we can get many bodies.
Yeah, many bodies, because we cannot see the heavens, the so-called heavens. It may be kind of a religious term, but there are these higher planetary systems where you experience, joy in a different way, a sattvic experience. So, virtue, like sattvic, I said. So, but to go there, to be there, you need a special body for that. In fact, for the museum, we are using a very interesting metaphor, which is the metaverse metaphor.
The metaverse. Oh no.
The metaverse. Yeah, because what it turns out is that these 14 planetary systems is like a giant video game, metaverse, where you can get a body, a player body, and I'll call an avatar sometimes, and with that you can play in different levels
and have different experiences, and have different and interact with different beings. That it makes sense. It makes sense, and you take on an identity that's not you.
Yeah,
and then you go to these different places of enjoyment, or what's that game? What's that video game? Anyway,
there are so many.
There's so violent video games that Call of Duty or something like that. All of a sudden you're in war, and then all of a sudden here you're like enjoying everything in the higher planets.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the universe is structured in that way. So someone prepared the universe so that we can enjoy, we can experience in so many one of these 14 planetary systems.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. that actually Krishna is actually facilitating our desire.
Yeah,
It's not like God is punishing us. We're just
Yeah.
choosing something
that's important.
by our behavior.
Yeah.
And that's going to give us a body. And people say, well, no, why would I choose this? But people choose bad bodies all the time. In this lifetime, we feel like, man, I should be in better shape. You know what I mean? But I'm choosing not to. It's not like Krishna's giving me this body. I'm actually choosing maybe perhaps not to eat healthy, not to work out, not to exercise. And I'm creating this body. And we do this with our thoughts and our actions again and again, lifetime after lifetime, perhaps.
Yeah, that's lifetime after lifetime. And he said, universe after universe.
Universe
It may
after
become very long thing.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Now, another. How am I doing for time? I'm gonna keep going here, because I'm interested. You know, they're talking about this planet right now. We're in the Bhagavatam, and they're talking about Bali Maharaj is getting sent to Sutala, the planet Sutala, which is below the Earth planet. And Vishnu said he's going to show up there, and Prahlad Maharaj is going to go there. And it's supposedly the planets of the race of demons, but it sounds like a spiritual place. What is it about? Can you talk about these subterranean heavens?
Another really good question, and one way we can just quickly explain it is that you're right. You know, these lower planets can be quite amazing and opulent and fun and all of these things, but what it lacks is the ability to have God consciousness.
Okay, that's what they mean by subterranean,
Yeah.
because they're just like devoid of God. They're
Yes.
very sophisticated in many ways. And what happens, and when they get progressively lower, do they get progressively more painful?
You know, it's not painful, actually.
Hell is not painful.
No, it's because you are saying hell. It's not hell. It's lower planetary system. So as he was saying, these are, you know, actually heavens. Like
Okay, where's hell?
hell
Did
is
I miss
another.
hell?
Yeah, hell is another thing, but it's a very little part in this Vedic culture. It's not so important as the 14 planetary system.
Wait a second.
So
there's no hell in the 14 planetary system?
No, the hell is below those.
Below the 14.
Yeah.
I know this. I've been doing this game for 36 years. I did not know hell was not part of the 14.
No.
Where's Patala? Isn't that a hell?
No, Patala is the last planet of the 14 planetary systems. You know, the
Yeah.
bottom one, and it's of the lower planetary systems. It's not hell.
It's
hell
not
is another
hell.
thing. Yeah, it's 26th chapter of 5th canto. Then it's
See,
Parikshit.
I shouldn't have
you know.
skipped that
Yeah.
section of the Bhagavatam.
So
I would
important.
know these things.
So important. And actually, it's very funny because, you know, Sukadeva Goswami is not speaking about them. It's not interested in speaking
Yeah.
about them.
Why is he
But then
talking about- why is he talking about them?
Parikshit Maharaj, when all the 14 planetary systems were explained, is Parikshit Maharaj, which is, by the way, dying in a few days, is wanting to know about the hellish planet, like you are asking, you know.
Wow.
And he asks, you know, tell me about it. Okay, I will tell you. And so
He's just making it's a good conversation. So he's just
absolutely.
swirling off in another direction, perhaps.
He wanted to know about the hells. You said, you know, yeah, he wanted to know.
Mara, remind me that to tell Kostuba, Maharaj Parikshit also squirrels off sometimes. Okay. This seems completely off base, but what about the planets of the Nagas?
Yeah.
Is there a planet of Nagas? And can you say something about that? Nagas are snakes. And it's, from what I understand, is it's inauspicious, but there happens to be 3 very auspicious snakes. Now, I've heard a devotee scientist say this Naga planet and this Naga worship could be similar to dragon worship of China.
Oh,
You know, there's dragon worship,
yeah.
and the Nagas are powerful beings.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, so there
Shed
is,
light on dragons, please.
so there is this Naga.
This is where
serpent-
people start unfollowing our podcast,
Yeah.
and we got a whole new slew of new followers.
So yeah, I think that all those lower planetary systems are the Nagas. You know, where the Nagas are very important because they are called subterraneans. So there is no light of the sun there.
There's no light.
No
from this.
light. So the light comes from these jewels of the nagas. So it's like an artificial light made of them. So what we may think nagas of this like huge serpents or like that. But the point is that the serpent, like the dragon, always represented some kind of energy.
Sure.
It's that kind of energy, and that's the energy we usually use to exploit matter, to exploit this world.
Interesting.
So it's that kind of energy. That is why without sun, it's asat, or we know it's asura. Sura in Sanskrit means light or divine light. And asura means it's not light.
Without light.
So without light. So some of those things may be metaphorical, so just symbolic.
Sure.
So the serpentine energy should be again given to the Lord. And in fact, there is one very important serpent, which is Sankarshan, which is actually Sankarshan is actually in the bottom, and everything is how do you say
resting
that?
on
Resting on his
head.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's an important energy, and it's the Lord energy actually, and happens to be actually Nityananda again, but I'm not going into details of that.
No, I could do this interview for hours. We have to almost cut it short, but I want to ask one more question, Mara, before you get your hands on that dial. Mara's like getting her fingers all over, but I have to ask this question. Let's see, I got the Nagas. Okay. This is just because everybody wants it. UFOs, where are they from? Are they from the subterranean heavens? From the higher planets? Is it made of subtle matter? We talk about the Bhagavatam talks about flying ships. So why don't we see Joe Rogan asked me this question, why don't we find the skeletons of just like sometimes you find an old car in the junkyard? Why don't we find any of these? Are they made of subtle energy?
Yeah, again, what is a starship? What is the idea is that there may be, or there are some, technologies that can maybe help us to go from one planet to another, from one dimension to another. But we are not speaking of, a big Ferrari flying, it's, because we are prone to think that, Prabhupada used to use that image of the frog in the well, So we have this little planet Earth, which is, floating in the middle of nothing, into this big universe, with billions and billions and trillions of planets, So we think, that there should be a kind of
Something
Ferrari with, maybe electric motor,
If you don't know that analogy, the frog is, sometimes you see these wells in India and there's a frog jumps in a well and then gives birth to a bunch of tadpoles. And those tadpoles exist in the well. Maybe they mate and they have babies. You got 7 generations of frogs that have never been outside the well. And so one of the frogs is saying, I wonder what's outside of this well. And even though they might be right by the Arabian Sea, the other frogs were like, well, nothing's outside of our well. And then one frog secretly climbs up the well and he goes, oh my God, look at this, the Arabian Sea. Wait till I tell the other frogs. And he goes back and he goes, you're never going to believe what I just saw. I saw a gigantic well. And they're like, well, what do you mean gigantic? Like bigger than ours? Yes, and much bigger than ours. Like what, twice as big as ours? So it's like, it's way beyond any type of frog-like conception of the universe and we're just living in this tiny world and this is all we know. So I'm picturing Ferraris. I'm picturing the Starship Enterprise. I'm picturing, Battlestar Galactica. I'm picturing all this stuff. So yeah, why not settle about it? Anyway, what do you think about when they say, now, when I start talking UFOs, are you like, this guy's nuts? Or do you thinking, oh yeah, why not?
It's totally
What do you think? What do you think?
What's the
You're a
question?
PhD, right?
What's
You're a PhD, right?
What's the question?
UFOs. You believe in UFOs? You think people are visiting, watching, observing,
Well,
probing?
Probing.
That's what they do when they get you.
They probe you. Well, so I'll give my quick, boring science answer is that I know.
It's okay.
What we do is we have telescopes now that are searching other stars nearby
Okay.
and looking for planets around them
Okay.
that are a certain distance from that star. And the star is like our own sun. So they're looking for other Earths.
Okay.
And we've found thousands of these
Wow.
just locally.
Wow.
By locally, I mean pretty far, but still in the big scheme of things, very locally.
Hmm.
And the extrapolation is that I think it's of order like 300 million Earth-like planets in our own galaxy, and there are trillions
said
of
that.
galaxies.
We always say that, right?
Yeah.
There's millions of other Earths.
Now, what's cool about the Bhagavatam is that it stresses that it's not just carbon-based life.
Sure.
That's all we're seeing.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to look like us. Why does everything always have to look like us? Right? Why can't there be a fireman? Like literally a guy made a fire living on the sun. Why not? Because I can't see a fireman?
It's a great exhibit for the museum.
The fireman?
Fireman.
If you need me to model it, I can.
No, but it's true that the best we can do as scientists is look for things that we know.
Mm.
So things that look like our own Earth, they have a water type atmosphere, oxygen. But the Bhagavatam explains that the universe is absolutely replete with life everywhere.
Amazing.
And if you do the same extrapolation in modern astronomy, that's my answer to UFOs. Is
Sure.
I can't tell you what it would look like, but
Sure.
how can there not be life everywhere?
Well, I was thinking you could look at this planet. It's like I can live on land. Land is great. But there's fish that can live in fresh water. Then there's weird fish that can live in salted water. Then there's weirder fish that can live in the Mariana Trench so far down that they're like glowing and sort of jellyfish faces.
By the way, that's in the museum.
Oh, really?
We have
Now I'm thinking like a scientist.
we're obsessed with this little worm. What's it called? It's like a something. Yeah, it looks like. But this thing that is so funny looking lives in one of those deep vents at the bottom of the ocean. They're called extremophiles because biology is like, how in the heck is there life down here?
Wow. But there is.
They look like little caterpillars. It's so strange. It's life is everywhere.
Life, and that's what the Bhagavatam says. It's where you least expect it. There's also life there. It just doesn't look like us. It doesn't have a mustache. You know what I mean? It looks like something else.
And I used to have a little bit of a problem believing that, but I don't know if you've done many Joe Rogan podcasts,
I did one.
but in one of them, that one, he was kind of asking you about kind of like your faith in the Gita or the Bhagavatam. And you were saying how when you get to a city and they're like, oh, when you see that McDonald's, you take a right.
Yeah.
And you go and you're like, oh, there's a McDonald's, I'll take a right.
And you develop more faith according to the directions. Like, oh, and then you'll see a big flashing red light. Oh, there's the flashing red light. Every little step you get a little bit more faith. It comes in increments.
Yeah. So if you first come to a scientist and say there are these flying airplanes and all of these strange things, it'll be off-putting.
Sure.
But if you progressively bring them along, it's super plausible. Of course that makes sense.
Yeah, your wife has slowly lured you into the
slowly. Yeah, reluctantly. But here
anyway, you guys, this was awesome.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
could keep going. We have a fixed time where we go, but maybe we can get you back on, but maybe not live because we don't live near each other. But
are we allowed to make a quick plug?
Yeah, you can make a plug. Please make a plug.
Okay.
What are you working on? We want to support you guys, whatever you're doing.
You can, of course, donate to the SMOVP. That would be amazing. Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium, or just the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium.
What is that link? Do you have it?
TOVP.org.
Yeah.
TOVP.org. Okay, Mara's going to put it on the show notes.
Yes. And then beyond that, Laura Girdari and myself have started our own institute called the Science and Philosophy Institute, a young upstart little venture we're doing.
Great.
Where we're merging together ideas in science and philosophy in a way that we're trying to have open dialogues like these with people from all backgrounds, music, art, science, whatever, to just talk about all of these things that we're so interested in. Why are we here? What's the purpose? All of that. So sciencephilosophy.org, please subscribe.
Okay, thank you
That's
very much. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate you guys for being here. Glad I get to know you all better. Laura, thank you for being here too. Everybody who's listening, thanks to be here. You can't see. Actually, let's let them see. We got a big live crowd today. People just coming over. We're meeting the Swedish people here in Mayapur. Say hi, everybody. Get a clap. And thanks to everybody joining our crazy schedule. Remember, tomorrow it's at 6:30 a.m. New York time, and we're interviewing Sitala Devi. You're gonna love her. I'll see you then. Thanks to everybody for coming live. Thanks for everybody showing up on Zoom. It's a beautiful day for a beautiful day. Let the magic continue to flow. And a maha. Haribo!